Siobhan Thompson is sort of the perfect player from a game master perspective. Not only is she a great role player who makes interesting characters, but she also seamlessly blends into the world while also building on it in believable and fascinating ways. Her characters never feel out of place or like they're in the wrong genre, unless that's the point. And they always add something new to the world that offers a different perspective while staying true to the genre. From a game master perspective, this type of player is invaluable. They make your job so much easier. If you go to your players and say, this is going to be a lighthearted campaign in a high fantasy world, it's going to be silly and chaotic with a lot of shenanigans, there's a good chance one of them is going to show up like, my name is Darkstar Nightwalker. I'm a drowned necromancer who was orphaned straight out of the womb. I'm a loner who doesn't need or want friends. I've never smiled. But luckily, Siobhan and players like her don't do stuff like that. But she also doesn't just blend so far into the world she becomes an NPC. She always finds an interesting angle to play within the existing campaign setting. I think some of the best examples of this are Adine Abernant from Fantasy High and Misty Moore from Unsleeping City. So let's take a closer look at the situations and thought processes behind those characters. One of which, in 80s high school movies, is the stuck-up kid who comes from a rich family. Another from the fantasy genre is the academic elven wizard. Adine is the result of combining these two character archetypes. She's a stuck-up elf from a family of wealthy wizards. Siobhan understood the campaign concept and created a character that fits perfectly into the combined genres. If you took out the fantasy elements, like her being an elf wizard, Adine would still fit into the 80s high school movie as a recognizable character. And if you took out the high school elements, she would still fit in a fantasy story. If she stopped there, that would have been perfectly fine. Adine would have been a great character, perfectly suited to the campaign that she's in. But Siobhan doesn't stop there. She builds on the concept with several different elements that not only build on the world, but also make Adine a more complex character. First off, Adine doesn't have a great relationship with her family.
Your father sort of ruffles the paper and says, oh, ghastly business that. I'm sure this will come up at my next meeting at the council. It's dreadful, absolutely dreadful.
I hate it when you do that.
What's that?
You say a thing is dreadful, but you don't say what it is.
Do you want to know?
I don't know.
Adine, an inquiring mind, is one that sees before it the opportunity for knowledge and strives to move forward. Your sister, Aelwyn, for example, I trust that when she wants to know something, she will ask. That's the mind of a researcher, rather than sort of the responsive, more visceral attitude of a practical caster, you understand?
If you really wanted us to know things, you'd get us papers ourselves, except you sit here and you say, oh, gosh, terrible, oh, drat, what a thing. And then I have to ask you, instead of you saying, oh, look, here's some actual practical information that you might want to know.
Well, I'm sure if you kill a hobgoblin, maybe you'll... What are the sort of things they do at Eggfort? I'm not sure. It's an honest question. Do you kill hobgoblins?
I cast Ray of Sickness underneath the kitchen table.
Adine, I don't understand why you and your sister can't simply get along.
Why don't you ask her? Why do you always ask me?
Well, I don't know. I don't choose to examine that. I'm rather busy. I'm trying to do this curriculum
Right,
today.
yes, of course, you're rather busy for me.
Her mother and father are very much academics. They're not particularly great at practical applications of magic, at least not her father. They went to a very prestigious magic school that Adine didn't get into, so now she has to go to adventuring school, which according to her family seems to be beneath them. They're high-class erudites. Adventuring is for the common mercenary. This tells us a lot about the class dynamics in this world. It informs some of the attitudes that elves, or at least high elves from Adine's parents' homeland, hold towards other countries and economic classes. It simultaneously builds the world and deepens Adine's character. Another example of a character that fits perfectly into the campaign is Misty Moore from Unsleeping City Chapter 1. The campaign pitch for that season is pretty simple: Magic New York. And what is more fitting to a Magic New York than a Magic Broadway star? I don't know, I've never been there, but it sounds pretty New York to me. Broadway is integral to New York's cultural identity and history. Literally the only reason I've ever wanted to go there was to see Hadestown with the original cast, but then COVID happened and it squashed that plan. When I think New York, I think Broadway. I think musical theater. I think of people like Stephen Sondheim. And while that's far from New York's only defining feature, it certainly is one of its most significant, at least to me. So Misty Moore fits into Unsleeping City like a glove. Again, if Siobhan stopped there, that'd be great. We'd have a really fun, interesting character who suits her world expertly. But again, Siobhan goes a little bit deeper. So not only is Misty a magical Broadway star, she's also a fairy. This adds another dimension to Unsleeping City's world building. So not only do you have a modern day New York, which already has tons of character, you also have the magical side of things, and then on top of that, you have the Fae. And the Fae are so much fun. They're tricky, but also extremely true to the word. They're deeply emotional and prone to outbursts while also being calm and serene. They're beautiful and simultaneously extraordinarily dangerous. Adding them to a setting is always a lot of fun. And Misty is in direct conflict with the Queen of the Fairies, Titania.
You are knocked back against the wall. The mirror fills your bedroom with light. You see standing on the other side of the mirror, wreathed in light, is Titania, Queen of the Fairies.
I kneel. It's been such a long time. Oh my god, you look great.
Silence! All the glassware in your bedroom shatters.
Oh, that's fine. I can get other glassware. I'm silent. I'm quiet.
My name. You would steal glamour meant for me. You would usurp the glory that was intended for your queen. 400 years ago, you ran away. And just because you hide in a place of iron and smoke does not mean you can deny your queen!
Their back and forth, their contentious relationship is a fantastic section of Unsleeping City. Giving your character rivalries and powerful enemies is a great way to make your character more interesting. Speaking of which, Siobhan Thompson does this with Adine as well. Adine also has a sister, with whom her relationship is strained.
It's awful that you got kicked out of Hudon. It's awful. It doesn't reflect well on our family, but that's not even the reason.
Punch her in the face.
It starts out as a simple sibling rivalry. Adine's sister is exactly the child their parents wanted, or at least they think she is. She got into the fancy school they wanted her to get into, she's great at magic, and appears to be the perfect daughter. I love this choice because something that people often overlook when they're creating characters is that characters' relationships. Who do they know in the world, and do they get along? And if they don't, why not? Not to mention, who is that person that they know? And what are they to the rest of the world? And then Siobhan goes another level deeper and gives her characters complications or mechanical disadvantages.
I very quickly put it in my backpack and then I panic because I'm like, why am I doing this? Nobody can see me do this. My stupid sister just told me to do this and I don't know why I'm doing it. And now I have a book that I've definitely stolen and I can't tell them that I've stolen
Please
it.
make a panic attack check. Make a...
5.
You go into a full-blown panic attack.
Shit. Oh god, oh my god.
Young lady, are you all right?
I found this book.
She decides that Adine has an anxiety disorder. This makes complete sense for a kid who's lived with hypercritical and disapproving parents. And it brings another interesting angle for the Game Master to play with. It's all in line and on theme and opens up a ton of potential character arcs to explore. Misty feeds off the adoration of her fans and every 60 or so years has to regenerate into a new body so she can stay in the immortal world. The problem is, should this ritual fail, she dies, and turns out Titania has a vested interest in killing Misty. So the combination of these factors sets up a major set piece and one of the more memorable battles of the season.
Misty, you are in the middle of casting a ritual spell that is going to renew your body. You've done this probably about a half dozen times before, and it's what has enabled your immortality. If this ritual doesn't go off without a hitch, it's the end of your reincarnations. So if the show is spoiled for any reason, if these people that you are harvesting glamour from do not enjoy this Broadway show, it means the end of your life.
The show must go on!
So now we have intricate, interesting characters who fit perfectly into their campaign worlds, with multitudes of different angles both the player and the Game Master can explore. They can dig into Adine's family troubles and how they inflame her anxiety. They can play out Misty's rivalry with the Queen of Fairies, and her constant need for adoration. From a game master perspective, this is an absolute gift. I now have a player character I know exactly what to do with. I know where they come from, I know where they stand emotionally, and I have a handful of NPCs I can use as antagonists or potentially supporting characters down the line, depending how things go. Everything I need to start building a narrative around. But don't just take my word for it.
And I wish that was more talked about, is the idea of, I come to the six of you guys with this thing, and I say, we're going to do Magic New York.
Yes.
And you go, magical Broadway star.
Yes.
And what I love about that is it is a boon to me.
Yes.
When a player character goes, I want to be something archetypal in this setting. Because if you had just been like, I'm going to be a bard. They like live in an apartment in Manhattan.
Right. They're just like doing some gigs down in the West Village, but then they're bartending 3 nights a week because like it's not really making ends meet. Like, that's boring.
And everyone, and then the
It's
barbarian.
D&D, you can be anybody.
You can be anybody.
Why wouldn't I be a Broadway star?
And you go to that archetype, and suddenly this thing that's like, oh, of course that would have to exist in magical New York. I think that's a great compass for players, is what's the character that if you choose to play them, everyone's going to go, of course that character has to exist here.
Siobhan is constantly giving her GM gifts. Through her character creation, she's helping to build the world, flesh it out, and populate it with interesting NPCs and pitch-perfect antagonists. She's practically a co-DM at this point. This makes the DM's job exponentially easier, because when your players do some of the heavy lifting and present you with a ton of different story hooks, or at least the materials to make hooks with, that means you have to spend less time prepping, and you can be fairly confident that what you're working towards will be effective. From my personal experience, it's pretty normal for my players to come up with a ton of great ideas that I never would have thought of, and they make my game so much better than they would have been. Tabletop RPGs are a deeply collaborative art form, and I think everyone on Dimension 20 understands that, but none as deeply as Siobhan Thompson. There was a lot of talk in this video about complicated characters, and while I love me some complexity, sometimes a simple, pure character can be just as, if not more, compelling. This is what Zach Oyama excels at. So if you want to see how he does that, you can check out my video on him over here. If you enjoyed this video, and more broadly, this series on the Dimension 20 core cast members, I would really appreciate it if you liked, comment, and subscribed. It helps more than you think. If you want to see my content a couple days early, then consider becoming a channel member. You also get your name shouted out at the end of videos. Speaking of which, shout out to my channel members: Vifa Fox, Caleb Eggensberger, Z Nunn, Ali Silem, Wellaboot1, FireGen1, Paloma Hernando, my mom Moon Nerdy, Western Bradshaw, Exodus Faith, and Alex's Love. Thank you so much for watching.